Welcome, everybody, to the next edition of Owl Talks. As part of the Project Owl community, we host these Owl Talks on a variety of topics that are of interest to the general OSINT community at large. And these are various lectures and discussions, question and answers that are recorded live in front of a studio audience right here at the Project Owl Discord server, which is our home and the hub for all things open source intelligence, as well as associated and related topics according to the community needs and interests. Today's Owl Talk is an exciting one. We are talking about a subject that impacts open source intelligence as well as emergency management and various related fields across the general globe, but it's one that we don't hear a lot about. And so today we're going to be discussing meteorology in the open source intelligence work that we do and have a general discussion on its impact to OSINT as well as emergency management and related fields. So today is all about weather. My name is Wulf the Norse Modalorian. I'm one of the moderators here at the Project Owl OSINT community, and I've been here for a little while. And with me today is our server owner, as well as one of our administrators, adioAdam, who is with us as well. I will be filling in for ACR, who's our normal host. He's not available today, but we are excited to have this conversation, and we encourage all of you to participate and submit questions. So with that, adioAdam, do you want to give us your introduction?
Hello everyone, I'm adioAdam. Norse, I can just barely hear myself. There you go. I am, of course, a server owner, but in real life, I am a supervisor of emergency management 911 dispatcher as well, certified APCO. I'm also a degreed meteorologist, so I have various experience in regards to weather, emergency management, and of course OSINT and how they all cross over. In addition, I have some previous experience. I've done TV weather, and I've also been the general manager of an actual real-life radio station. So just some more background there. Today we're going to be focusing on weather and storm chasing. I've done quite a bit of storm chasing over the years. And any other questions, emergency management questions, dispatch questions, anything you'd like to know, just go ahead and ask. And make sure to put them in the Owl Talks. I believe we have Florida Mod. Shout out to Florida Mod, by the way, Florida Pan. And Florida will be recording the session as well as organizing the question for us. So shout out to Florida.
All right, thank you. So the way this talk is going to work today, we are going to kind of have just an open dialogue and conversation. There's a list of questions that were submitted prior to this live recording from our audience and members at Project Owl. We will go through some of those questions, but we also welcome questions from you, the audience. So there is a feature, you have the ability to raise your hand if you would like to come forward and speak to us and ask your question or make a comment or bring up a topic for discussion. This is your moment to do so. If you are not comfortable or not able to speak, that is fine as well. You can also use the Owl Talk text channel and submit your questions there as well. And members of the moderator teams will be monitoring that, and I will be monitoring that as well. And we'll be bringing that forward and having a conversation too. And I will also be just kind of doing a free-flowing conversation with adioAdam, just using my own background in a little bit of emergency management, more on the planning side, and we'll kind of have a talk over some of the issues that have come up there too. So to kick this off, the first kind of question I would like to ask you and see what your thoughts are on this is, meteorology seems to be a fairly specialized academic field, a specialized career. How did you get into meteorology? What was the pathway? And when was the moment where you thought, this is the pathway I want to work on? for my training and profession.
It's all started, and I know this is going to sound really corny, but it was my birthday in 2002. And growing up in Indiana, you get used to tornadoes. But I was only I can't remember how old I was. I was in kindergarten, first grade, something like that. And I was waiting for storms. I knew there were going to be storms that day. I didn't know how bad they were going to be or anything like that. But the tornado siren sounded, which at the time was common when you had a severe thunderstorm warning and a tornado watch. Now different agencies have their own different standards on when they sound the tornado sirens, but those were the standards that most of the state of Indiana followed at that time. When I was in the middle, well, I was in the middle, near the end of my birthday celebration, the sirens went off once. I specifically remember asking my teacher at the time, rest her soul, when they're going to sound again. They sounded later, about 5-10 minutes later, for a tornado warning, and my school was hit by the tornado. It was it was an F3. It was not an EF3 at that time, because the new scale hadn't come into effect yet. I remember all the glass being shattered. Um, you could kind of feel your back warming up against friction of the wall. We had a tree thrown through our entire school gym, destroyed the entire school gym. And I think the one thing that really stuck out to me and what got me into meteorology was I was walking through the hall, and they told us there was a tree in the gym, but all the way on the other side of the school, there was a single stick laying in the hallway. And there was no holes around it, and none of the windows were broken near it, like within, I would say, 100 feet of it, or 150 feet of it. And I was always curious how that single stick got there. So I was determined to figure out how that single stick got there. I still can't explain it today, so it hasn't really helped me much. But that's how I decided I want to go into meteorology.
It's funny when you hear stories of people in specialized skill sets or specialized fields like this. I always feel like there is a pivotal nexus point that really pointed them towards that career field. And it seems like there's no exception there. I remember being in Fort Seal, Oklahoma, and my first ever experience in kind of Tornado Alley and being in the middle of one of those storms. And it left a massive impression on just how powerful and destructive those events. So there's kind of a series of questions here that are submitted from the audience that I'd like to start going through. I think it's some interesting conversations here. First question is, are there different specialties when it comes to meteorology? And if so, what are they? And do they require additional schooling beyond a normal meteorological degree?
There are a lot of different specialties with meteorology, and even though meteorology is kind of a niche field in itself, it's a lot of math, a lot of science. There are a lot of different things you can do with it. One specialty is research meteorology, which I would love if I was smart enough to do it. You basically design the weather models. You go out, you release the weather balloons, you analyze the data, you figure out how to improve it. You place probes in front of tornadoes. You try to figure out the structure of a tornado because, and a lot of people don't know this, radar doesn't generally capture tornadoes that, the last few hundred feet above the ground. And so that is the big mystery right now, is we're trying to figure out exactly what happens in that 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, however, couple hundred feet, to try to figure out, what makes these tornadoes so destructive closer to the ground. And that's all research meteorology. All of that is a lot of data. It's a lot of papers to sort through, to try to figure out what's going on. And there's hurricane specialists too, where you focus on hurricanes. You go all over the world, and you place weather instruments in the way of hurricanes, and you try to study how the hurricanes move and how hurricanes work. Because while we know generally the path hurricanes will take, plus or minus a couple hundred miles, other than that, the exact movements are still unknown to this day. And so research meteorology is a giant specialty. There's broadcast meteorology. You have to be personable. You have to be able to work on a green screen. There's private meteorology where you're doing your own forecasts for farmers, for example. They will buy things, or major sports teams and stuff like that. They will buy weather forecasts off of you. So there's private meteorology. There's public meteorology where you're National Weather Service employed, or there's emergency management meteorology where you're focusing on the aftermath and recovery of what happens. There's a lot of different specialties. In terms of research meteorology, that's going to be where you want your higher degrees. You can get a doctorate. You can do postdocs in meteorology and storm chasing and that kind of stuff. So there's definitely room to improve besides your basic bachelor's degree.
In that term of research meteorology, you mentioned about private meteorology, and I know that has been an interesting turn in the field as private weather services and private meteorology companies become larger. Do you see that research meteorology is still mostly the domain of public sector, government services, and academic kind of settings, or do you see that there are larger corporations, especially when you start looking at risk management and risk awareness, that are wanting to push more of that boundary of research meteorology and how much damage does a hurricane actually do as it comes through an oil platform, for example, or work site, that kind of stuff?
A college is still more designed for the research meteorology aspect, but as time goes on, more of the forecasting, more of the meteorologists are going into the private sector. A lot of people don't know this. FedEx has meteorologists. The Postal Service has meteorologists. UPS has meteorologists because they've got to fly planes, they've got to drive their trucks, they got to know where to go, where to avoid. And private companies are growing out of thin air. I know one private company locally that went from 3 people when it started, and they've got 15, 16 employees now. And that's just one specific company. So in terms of where it's going, research meteorology will still be a thing. It will probably be more of a crowdsourcing thing. There will still be specialists, of course, there always will be in research meteorology, but I can see it branching out more towards, did you do this? If so, send your data here, because there's going to be a lot of private meteorologists out there here soon. In terms of the public sector, the government, of course, had a hiring freeze in 2008, and they didn't hire people for 10 years except to replace people that are retiring. So in terms of public sector, who knows? Especially with privatization and everything, all the National Weather Service and everything. Who knows? Maybe private in 15, 20 years.
So you mentioned crowdsourcing, and that's an interesting one. I kind of want to talk about that for a moment. There's a question submitted too by Scotty in the chat, talking about, is all of this meteorology, is it sort of open source? Can you do amateur meteorology? What does that crowdsourcing look like at that sort of research level for those amateur meteorologists?
Yeah, you can totally do amateur meteorology. Of course, you're not always going to get everything right. A lot of the models get everything wrong. There is data that real meteorologists have access to that normal people won't. A good example of that is the National Weather Service. All of their stuff is publicly funded, so it has to be available to the public. So their GFS, their Global Forecast System model, their NAM, North American model, those are all publicly available. However, in some cases, like the Euro, the ECMWF model, that is behind a paywall. There are also AccuWeather models. There are each TV station has their own what's it called, provider for their graphics, and they have their own models. Like WSI has its own weather model. So there is stuff behind a paywall, and generally the stuff behind the paywall is more quality. But the National Weather Service does allow a good number of models for free, and you would be able to do it yourself with quite a bit of training. I would caution against using your own forecast if you're just starting for an event that you're holding or a major event. For example, there's a Facebook page called Meteorologists. It's all capital letters, and half of that is complete junk. I'll be honest with you. So there are dangers behind that because a lot of people use it to create panic. They see 30 inches of snow in Texas, and they on a model because it's 2 weeks out, and they say, oh yeah, this is going to happen. They post it on Facebook. It gets a lot of attention. It's not actually going to happen. That's not realistic. And so you kind of have to sort out the real stuff from the fake stuff.
I want to expand on that. Then we have a question in the audience, so we'll start taking a couple audience questions. Sorting the fake stuff from the real stuff. The disinformation in a lot of fields has been garnering a lot of attention, especially over the last few years, as we look at disinformation campaigns that are ongoing, both from state actors or extremist organizations. In meteorology, disinformation, what is the real technique to fight that? How would you really sort through the fake versus the false? Is it paying attention to where those models are coming from? Are you looking to verify that against known public models? What's really the best sequence there to filter out the fake?
Well, I would say the first thing that you should do is look into, first of all, who's posting it. Is it some random Facebook page? Is it someone that you trust? The second thing I would look for is a variation in models. Every model posted generally has a name of what kind of model it is and how many hours out it is. Anything over 72 hours, I wouldn't trust for 100%. Anything over 200 hours, I wouldn't trust at all. It is imperative that you look at something. If it says it's 384 hours out from when that model was ran, then that's no good. That's going to be complete junk. It's going to change tomorrow. So check it and check the model name too, because if they're only posting one model, chances are that they've only looked at that one model, or they're only posting that one model so that way they can get that popularity, so that way they can spread that disinformation. And it's really dangerous for them to be spreading that disinformation, because if they say there's going to be a massive tornado outbreak, people are going to cancel their plans. You could have, wedding parties canceled. You can have school graduations canceled. And all of a sudden it's sunny and 80 degrees and there's not a problem. Well, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I know a lot of people use Celsius, and that's a whole nother debate. But anyways, it's dangerous to do that. So, and then you can compare it. I mean, every country has a weather service. Go on there and compare it to what they're saying. Go on AccuWeather, go on Weather Channel, see what they're saying, compare those forecasts. And if they're posting information that seems completely false, like Weather Service is saying you've got 5 inches of snow and this Facebook page is saying 20, I would report that Facebook page to Facebook for disinformation or false fake news, because that is dangerous and that will get people hurt in the long run.
Okay. Let's take some questions from the audience here. We have one hand raised up. So what we'll do is, if you raise your hand up, I can pull you up to speak. You can come on microphone. We do ask that you speak slowly and clearly so you can be picked up by the recording for our distribution to Spotify and other platforms. So I'm going to click it. You can come up. You can ask your question or make your comment. And then we'll return you to the audience. If anybody listening would also like to ask any questions, just click the raise hand button and we will get to you. So let's see. First up, we have everything is awful. I'm going to click the invite to speak. Just accept that invite and you'll be able to come up and ask us your question.
Good evening. What do you think the impact of technology and artificial intelligence will have on the career of meteorology going forward, as more and more computing power is used to predict trends in weather and climate?
That's a great question. Meteorologists I don't think they'll ever be completely replaced, just because there has to be some sort of human input, especially with such long, complex math equations, computers tend to go off the wire. For example, if you look at a GFS snowfall forecast in the winter, it may say you're going to get 40 inches of snow when you're only going to get 5. So I don't think that computers will ever and AI will ever completely replace meteorology. Do I think they will become more prevalent? Yes. We've moved on from doing everything on pen and paper and doing everything via weather maps. You see how they present on TV. They used to draw on a whiteboard with markers, and that's how they did their weather. That is clearly not how it's done anymore. And I think computers and AI will gradually take over a more prevalent role, but I don't think they'll ever actually replace real meteorologists.
So what we want to do next is there's a couple other questions here that are been submitted that I want to get to. First question is coming up from there's a request for an explanation on what is Skywarn. That has something that we've talked about a few times, I know, on Project Owl. So if you could just explain what Skywarn is, and what are some good resources for following it?
Absolutely. Skywarn is a volunteer program that's sponsored by the National Weather Service. I think there's between 350 400,000 storm spotters, trained storm spotters with Skywarn. Usually Skywarn is affiliated with an organization and a group called Ham Radio. If you ever want to join, let me know, because I'm a ham radio operator as well. But Skywarn is basically trained weather spotters trained by the National Weather Service and certified that their reports are going to be accurate. If a public reports that there may be hail, that's generally not taken. I mean, it's obviously taken seriously, but it's not taken as seriously as a trained spotter who, is trained to measure the hail properly. Or, for example, if there's a funnel cloud and there's a picture and that's it, that's all the National Weather Service has, they're more likely to take a trained storm spotter's version of whether it's a funnel cloud or whether it's a scud cloud more seriously versus some member of the public. Skywarn are usually, I think they're 2 or 4 hour classes, depending on where you are in the country, in the United States anyways. It is, it's not very in depth. It's very basic. But it just shows, it gives you a little bit of background on weather. It shows you what to look for, what to watch out for, especially as you're spotting a storm, being safe, being careful as you're doing that. It's very worth it. It's, as I said, only between 2 and 4 hours, I think, generally speaking. In addition, they do it online. I know the local National Weather Service here did it online this year because of COVID. But you can also do it on the Comet MetEd website, which is done through Colorado State University, I believe, University of Colorado, maybe. And you can get certified on there. You can print off your certificate and everything like that. But yeah, Skywarn is basic training for storm spotters in essence. And the organization, of course, for National Weather Service volunteer spotters.
I do have to say, I really do recommend that MetEd website if you are interested in this kind of stuff. I've sat through a couple of classes on there as part of my emergency management background and training, and I've found it really interesting, really well done. So those are just a great resource if this is a topic of even remote interest. I do find that a good, very basic understanding of meteorology, you'll be surprised how much it will come into play, especially in open source intelligence and kind of the work that we do here on the server. I think meteorology impacts that a lot more than sometimes we really think. And that was one of the questions I was wanting to bring up to you, Adam, was, from your lens, as you look at OSINT, you look at, when we do plane tracking, when we do ship tracking, when we look at satellite imagery coming in and the meteorological impacts that occur there. What is some things that you observe a lot or you note a lot that are really coming from that meteorology background that provide some unique perspectives into sort of the normal OSINT day-to-day operations that are going?
Absolutely. You can clearly see, especially when you have strong storms popping up, planes going around it, and that's good to know. As far as satellite intelligence, satellite imagery is very sensitive to clouds, at least the visible band is. And so if you have clouds over a target, you're not going to see what necessarily may be underneath it. A lot of militaries, if they're looking for surprise or whatever, they'll go under clouds because you have that satellite data to prevent that cloud cover prevents satellite data being collected. Um, at least visible satellite. Of course, there are other bands in which they can use, but primarily satellite visible. Um, it's always good to know, like, okay, so there's, for example, if you're looking at the Ukraine border with between Russia and Ukraine, you can see movement, but if you know, hey, there's going to be clouds of state, there's no point in checking the visible band. It saves you time, it saves you effort. In terms of ship tracking, if you see a storm forming, or a storm's forming and you're looking for a specific ship, it's probably not near that hurricane. You can probably move, a couple hundred miles away from the center of that hurricane, and it's probably not going to be around there. So it is helpful in terms of day-to-day OSINT operations. I'm also big into signals intelligence. As you can tell, I'm a ham radio operator. I've done a lot of radio stuff. So signals intelligence is big to me. So I know, hey, there's a thunderstorm in the area. HF is going to be dead. There's going to be static all over the place. There's no point in trying to do anything listening to uh, any type of radio stations or radio signals right now. It's also good if you're using an SDR, software defined radio, because hey, there's storm near this one. I'm not going to hear anything. It's going to be static. I'm going to get my ears blown out by my surround sound headphones because I'm listening to lightning.
So what's some stuff that we as OSINT practitioners can do to start incorporating some more basic meteorology understanding into the work? I mean, what are some real good basics or good starting points that you think, when it comes to looking at plane tracking, boat tracking, whatever, to kind of help understand that meteorology impact? What is there websites you suggest following? Is there, we talked about Skywarn and taking those classes, but what sort of some basics, some things to follow that just generally help overall some basic OSINT?
I think learning in terms of satellite imagery and that kind of stuff, looking at upper clouds and that kind of stuff, and where cloud cover may be, is going to help you a lot in terms of where you're going to get good satellite imagery from. In terms of plane tracking, you can look at the Storm Prediction Center's website, spc.noaa.gov, noaa.gov, and you can look and see, okay, there's going to be storms in this area. So, this airport may be grounded for a little bit, or this plane may be going around the storm, and that's why it's deviating from its planned track. I know some websites allows you to track destinations and departures. So you may be able to see a plane that may be flying from New York to Atlanta, but it's over in Nebraska, and you may be wondering why. Or it may be over in the Atlantic Ocean, and that may be why, depending on where the storms are. So it's just interesting how closely related, even though it seems like they are far off, how much weather actually affects everything we do. Going off of the comment of Global Mill Info that was made in the Owl Talk channel, he says meteorology was extremely important to D-Day. That tells you how important it is to military. Absolutely. The military employs thousands of meteorologists, both officers and enlisted, that are constantly working on weather, not only just for their base or their area, but for around the world. Because for military operations, you need to know, is there going to be rain? Are we going to have clouds for air cover? Are we going to have, are we going to be able to do our training flights today? Where's the cloud deck at? So that way we can plan for that. All that stuff matters to military operations as well.
Yeah, having met and spent a little bit of time with some combat weathermen, which are now special reconnaissance in the United States Air Force, the special operations community there. That is a very complex and pretty fascinating job, but the ability to do weather pattern and behavioral analysis of storms and all of that, and kind of build out meteorological reports while still doing all of your special operations tasks in a very austere and denied environment is pretty incredible, and a very needed, very essential service that's provided out there. And so, speaking of that, especially in the more tactical applications of meteorology, there's quite a few questions on the sort of the emergency management angle of meteorology. And so I think I want to start talking with kind of where we're all really familiar with this application. If you're in North America or you're in Southeast Asia, this is the hurricane and monsoon sort of seasons that come up where we have these giant storms come in and deal a ton of damage every year. You know, it's part of one of the things that I do is planning chief and Team Rubicon is respond to a lot of these. Every year I fly out to Texas and New Orleans as a disaster sawyer as well with a team of lumberjacks, and we do just weeks and weeks of hurricane recovery and hurricane disaster response, cutting out homes, cutting pathways for emergency vehicles, all that kind of stuff. And it just seems to be a trend. And what I've noticed just in my field is that it's steadily progressing worse and worse. And so I kind of want to see how you're seeing this, the serious weather, the climate change, this sort of adverse storm. Does it seem like that's getting worse? Do you have an idea of what we can expect for 2021? Do you think that climate change and what we're seeing there, it's bringing even a sharper focus to what you're doing and where we're going to see meteorology go?
Absolutely. I'll start with 2021 first. I expect we'll have probably an above average year, and the National Hurricane Center puts out outlooks, and they said that they agree with the above normal prediction. And for at least the Atlantic Pacific, probably going to have a lesser of a season due to El Nino. But the thing is, the interesting thing about this is, yes, the climate change is affecting storm interaction. It is trapping heat inside the planet with greenhouse gases, and the result of that is warmer ocean temperatures, especially when it comes to hurricanes, and it plays into flooding and that kind of stuff too. But the big thing is hurricanes, because hurricanes feed off of that warm ocean water. I mean, just think of a chocolate covered bonbon. It's delicious and you just want more. That's what the warm water is to a hurricane. It is candy. It feeds off of it. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like when you're really drunk and you just keep taking shots until you're gone. It's kind of like that. That hurricane just keeps chugging and chugging and chugging until it hits land. And that's when it passes out. It sucks up so much water that's why we have these flooding events. Like, for example, 2016 we had Harvey. It just sucked up so much water and dropped it so fast over Texas. I went to Harvey. I was a part of a FEMA district task force, and the flooding down there was absolutely unreal. Absolutely unreal. There's no question that the climate changing, and it is a gradual change. But it is changing to make storms worse. You can compare 1960s to 2010s, and you can clearly see the difference. There is a clear thing. Now, moving on from just hurricanes in terms of tornadoes and flooding, it is increasing those as well. It's playing with the weather patterns, especially in the North American region. And so we can expect, as global warming continues to get worse, that these storms will continue to get worse. And who knows how long it'll take after what we've done to the planet to return back to the way it was some 50, 100 years ago.
And how do you see that affecting meteorology in general? Do you think disaster meteorology and sort of providing that incident weather analysis is going to get bigger as we go through this. I'm thinking too, just from my experience of doing international disaster response, dropping into sort of austere environments and doing disaster reconnaissance or something like that in areas that are very limited in that skill set infrastructure, and to be able to sort of provide that services. I mean, do you see that is going to become a bigger need, and there's a more of a focus to that? So some of that field meteorology services.
Absolutely. I think that's going to have a major impact because the focus right now was mostly in the US, at least on tornado season and that kind of stuff. But it's going to switch to major storms, major tornado outbreaks, major hurricanes as global warming gets worse, because those are going to be the things that impact the most people. You go to Montana, you may have a couple hundred meteorologists in the whole state. You go down to Florida, you have thousands of meteorologists, if not tens of thousands of meteorologists living in Florida because of all of the weather events going on. Or you go out to the plains, Oklahoma, Kansas, you have tens of thousands of meteorologists living out there. And that is because those are where meteorologists are more needed. That's where the crop owners, the residents of highly populated areas, that's where they need the most help. In terms of how it will affect disaster meteorology, I think disaster meteorology is going to turn more towards disaster mitigation. How do we solve this? Is there a way we can solve this meteorologically? Is there a way we can get better information in terms of research meteorology? I think that's going to become the hot button issue, at least until we are able to somehow mitigate the climate change events that is unfolding.
One of our established members just asked a question in the text channel that I think is a really good break off from this point. You've talked a little bit about hurricanes, tornadoes, major storms. What about polar vortexes and how they're changing what we're kind of expecting to see in the U.S., but also just kind of around the world? What are you hearing in that area?
In terms of the polar vortex, it relies around the Arctic high pressure. The Arctic high pressure changes with, it provides a basis for the jet stream, the various jet streams around the world, at least in the northern hemisphere. And how it moves is basically how the weather across the world is going to end up moving eventually. When you have a polar vortex break off a piece of it, break off and head south further deep into the U.S., that affects the weather pattern. Sure, it's high pressure, but it's a steep, sharp cutoff of cold. They have been getting worse. I'm not specifically going to say that they've been getting worse due to climate change, but climate change does, as I said, impact the entire environmental system that the world operates on. And so if there's going to be disruptions in the entire system, that will inevitably affect all of the aspects of how global weather works, including polar vortices. That's unfortunately right now the best answer that I can give you. There's still a lot of research to be done on how it's going to impact things in the future. And that's something that research meteorology still has yet to figure out, in addition to all of the other things that research meteorology has to figure out. So the answer is we will have to wait and see.
As the answer is for a lot of different weather patterns, I feel like. What weather event do you see as the most costly in the terms of property or in the terms of life loss?
As far as the most costly, that would be hurricanes. And that's not only because of the monetary damage. A lot of people live near the coast. A lot of people are migrating to the coast, so it's only going to get worse. But in terms of lives, a hurricane or tornadoes are bad. Don't get me wrong, but you're looking at maybe in decent tornado cases, a 1 mile epicenter where you maybe have a 2 mile swath of damage from the tornado itself. and it's along a straight line path or close to straight line path. Hurricanes don't have that. They are still fairly unpredictable. 72 hours out, the hurricane can still completely shift and go the opposite direction. And people aren't ready to just pack up all their lives and pack up their entire family and get out in 3 days. Some people can't do that due to financial issues or other hardships that they have. So I would have to say hurricanes are the most costly at this point. Whether that will change in the long run, we'll see. But remember, hurricanes are just going to get worse as time moves on until we're able to solve the climate change crisis.
Interesting. Let's look at the audience here. Let's see. We've got another hand raised. Let's see. We've got another question from Everything is Awful Again. We're going to go ahead and have you come up and ask your question. If anybody else in the audience would like to come up and ask a question or make a comment, go ahead and hit that raise your hand button now so we can pull you up and you can address them to Adam. So let's hear from Everything is Awful. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the possible manipulation of weather, temperature, precipitation patterns by foreign or really non-foreign actors in the future or in the present through means that we aren't fully comprehensive of, but that is something that is really kind of piques my interest in how foreign states or even our allegiances can manipulate weather patterns, really.
Yeah, so it's not weather modification is not easy on a large scale. I want to preface that in this. And all forms of weather modification have limits. There are speculations that HAARP causes, HAARP, which is no longer full-time operational. I don't know if a lot of people know that. It caused the 2011 earthquake in Japan. No. That's not capable. What is possible is a country launching, for example, dry ice to create flooding further downstream if the weather system is right. That is a concern. However, in a large scale, that would be hard to do. That would probably be that requires a lot of dry ice.
Right.
Cloud seeding is a thing that they tested, I believe, in Arizona to get rain downstream. What was it, a couple years ago during a drought? It was somewhat effective. However, that's all we have so far. Cloud seeding is probably the way of weather manipulation.
Right.
It is a concern, and as we learn more about how weather works and how to manipulate weather potentially for advantages, for certain areas or for certain crop fields and stuff like that, it will become more of a concern. As of right now, with the technology we have, I do not see that being an issue at this point.
Right. One thing that kind of piqued my interest recently was the pretty severe drought in Taiwan. And we all know the geopolitical consequences of that region. So I'm just kind of thinking in the back of my mind, like, what can foreign actors do to actually manipulate and even if it's subtle, what can they do to manipulate weather? But I appreciate your.
Yeah, it's no problem. The main thing right now would be cloud seeding. As Apple pointed out in the chat, they did cloud seeding in North Texas 2013, 2015. It didn't have too much of an effect. But the main concern would be a massive, call it a barrage of dry ice or other cloud seeding material flooding an area. That would be my main concern in terms of a geopolitical consequence at this point.
So we're getting down here. We've got a little bit of time left. I want to make sure we capture all the rest of the questions out there. If anybody else in the audience wants to come up, just click the raise the hand button, and I will pull you up to make your question or give out your comment. I wanted to ask on this kind of trend and kind of going off of that last question in the terms of weather crises and how those are being handled. There was a question that's kind of a part of a series of questions on how we respond to these global weather crises. How does America respond to global weather crises? What does that look like in the terms of governmental infrastructure? How do we respond to huge, large-scale events? What does that look like? If you could just kind of walk us through, I think both on the national side is the question, as well as the international side, what a response to a real adverse weather event looks like.
Well, in terms of a response for national, we have the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and as much heat as FEMA takes, they do a good job at managing the response to major events. While they obviously didn't do great on the pandemic with half the masks and everything spoiled, in terms of major weather events, they generally do a good job. We have the FEMA task force system, with every state having in between 1 and 5 task forces. I think California has 20 or something. I don't know. Someone from California would probably be able to better educate everyone on that. But in terms of the task force system, the backup system, FEMA does a good job responding nationally. In terms of international response, of course, we have NGOs, non-governmental organizations that assist them. I mean, they do national too, but they do international as well. And they also do a good job in terms of contributing money. Now, money obviously doesn't fix everything. Money is reliant on what you get with that money, and in some cases, that doesn't always get what you need. A better response to international crises would be to send people. Government-sponsored rescue efforts in those countries. Send the best of the best. FDNY Rescue One's team. Chicago Fire, LA Fire, that kind of stuff. That happens nationally, though. That does not happen on an international basis in terms of government spending.
Okay. Let's see. We have a question in the audience. A million has raised their hand. Looks like they're visiting us from the public discovery. So we can bring you up. Just speak slowly, please, and feel free to ask any question related to weather or emergency management or storm chasing as we talk about it here at Project Owl. So I'm going to go ahead and let you do an invite to speak, and you can come on up and ask your question.
Okay, so this is about flooding. Basically, I've heard of these things where there are levees built to stop flooding by cities and stuff. And that causes cities on the other side of an embankment to also build up their levees to stop flooding as well, creating these what are called levee wars. What do you think are the end consequences of these levee wars? Do you think they're going to go on ad infinitum, or are they going to have to stop at some point?
Good question, and it definitely relates to emergency management and weather. In terms of building levees higher, I will always encourage that, especially as hurricanes gets worse, storm surge gets worse, flooding gets worse. It is a positive thing for communities to be building up their levees, no matter whether it's in response to another community building their levees or whether it is in response to what may happen in the future. With that being said, there is such a thing as too much. Levees for areas that are not going to get flooded or not going to get destroyed on I would say maybe 100-year basis aren't really that necessary. We have a river that runs through town here, and those levees are solid, but that's because they're not that high. As you build levees higher and higher, just based on the foundation they have, you start running into structural issues. New Orleans found this out with their levees failing during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Texas had some levees and they found out those failed with the massive flooding that Harvey caused. And that's another reason why levees may not want to go so high. If you have internal flooding, and internal meaning in the land on the other side of the levee of the river, that river is not able to get downstream. And so it's going to sit there and sit there and sit there, just like it did with Hurricane Harvey. And so there is a downside to that, and that is if you have massive flooding on the other side of the river, that water wants to get to the river so that way it can drain back out to the ocean, but it's not able to. And that's a problem in terms of, ruining ground, especially if it's salt water, like from the ocean. That salt's going to ruin cornfields, other crop fields. It's going to render them unusable. So a big thing is preparing for the future while not overdoing it for today. That's a big issue.
That's a fantastic question. I appreciate you bringing that forward. I'll return you to the audience unless you have anything follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. It's still about flooding. Namely, it's about the toxic chemicals that exist in rivers, like the Hudson, for example. I believe that has a bunch of TFCs in it, last I remember hearing about. What do you think more flooding will have as a consequence for these toxic chemicals that have been dumped into rivers previously?
Yeah, that's another good question. In terms of a weather-related impact, that all that water has to evaporate at some point. That's how the ecosystem works. All matter, no matter is created nor destroyed. The water in the atmosphere that makes clouds. Cloud is just a big ball of evaporated moisture, for those who weren't aware of that. And rainstorms, that those chemicals burn off and they will evaporate into the atmosphere. And so that will create an issue later on down the road in terms of, acid rain perhaps, or other issues in terms of precipitation. But it's not only that water, if it flooded and goes over levees and stuff like that, gets into agriculture fields or a residential area, that water is toxic. That will impact the people that the flooding is also impacting. So you're compacting disaster on top of disaster. And in terms of the human aspect of storm preparedness and stuff, that may change everything in terms of how you respond to a flooding disaster. So that's a really good point, and more research is still yet to be done on that. I'll be honest with you. We will have to see how that turns out.
Really good conversation. I think that's something that we see more and more. And, if in the emergency management kind of response field, I know it's something that when we look at plans, we put together plans, we look at that flooding, that's always in the back of the mind of the risks that flooding brings with it. That's really hard to predict without a lot of work to kind of put that together and capture that. So really good question. I appreciate it. Any other follow-ups you have on that?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks for coming in. We appreciate you asking that question. We'll send you back to the audience. Hopefully you will stick around the server and join the community. Well, we'll go back here to the question pool that were submitted to us prior, before we went into this. So, we were talking about the flooding and the sort of disasters that brings. There's a question here that was submitted asking, what are some things that the public can do to be safer in these sort of emergencies that usually aren't done? And I know this is a common theme in emergency management whenever we talk about being in blue skies or preparing for a disaster. And one of the things emergency managers are always talking about is what can we do to prepare people to be more resilient, recover faster, protect their property, make themselves safer when these emergencies do hit. So what do you see, Adam, are some things that can be done that usually aren't, especially in this context of major weather events?
Absolutely. The first thing I would say, ready.gov/kit, build an emergency kit, have some games to play, food to eat, water to drink. a flashlight, a radio, a first aid kit. Have some masks with you. That will even those just alone will help you get ready for anything that may happen, weather related. And if you're stuck in your home for a while, a chemical release, anything like that, those will help you, especially if you turn off your ventilation system. Um, that is the first thing. Ready.gov/kit. You can get everything you need there for car safety, making disaster plans, emergency plans, all that stuff. You need a whistle, so that way you can whistle for help if you need it. The first thing I learned is SOS and Morse code. All the first responders are trained to listen for SOS and Morse code. So if you are stuck somewhere, they will be able to help you. You're going to need garbage bags. You're going to need toilet paper because you don't want to wipe your butt with a leaf. You're going to need all this stuff to help you get through any type of disaster. Planning. If a hurricane is heading towards your location, say you live on the coast, have a plan. Even if you have to stay with the mother-in-law you don't like, it's fine because you're going to be safe. Make sure to have some sort of plan. If you're going to be snowed in, maybe you take a vacation to your cousins for a few days. Try to find a way to plan around anything that may happen. Your home is destroyed by a tornado. If you're out in the plains or a flood, try to find a place to go. Find a place that's high ground that you can stay for a while, that's on high ground. Something possibly away from your area, because if there's a tornado near you, if there was a tornado near you, chances are other places have had storms near you as well. Have a backup plan for any eventuality. And that sounds difficult, but even if you have 2 or 3 different places you can go, that helps a lot. And the biggest thing is trying to get out of the way of whatever's going on. If you've got storms coming, just keep them in the back of your mind. If you're in the area with risk for tornadoes and tornado watch is issued, start planning. Okay, I'm at work, wife and kids are at home, or husband and kids are at home, or however your living situation is. Maybe it's just your husband or your wife. Then say, okay, this is what you guys need to do. You guys need to get ready. Put some mattresses in the bathroom. Get ready to take cover. Grab your helmets. Grab some books. Something like that. Have that ready to go, just in case that tornado warning comes across. Just have a plan. That's all I can say. Ready.gov has everything for you, and that will be a good guide for you in terms of getting everything ready for any eventuality.
There's a ton of really good resources out there on building disaster kits. There's some great YouTube channels on preparedness and being a prepper and all these kind of things. So there's some really great resources out there. And one of the advantages of Project Owl is we have some channels where a lot of that information is shared at. And we'll be posting some links to some of these things we're talking about as well in some of our channels Discord server. So check those out. If you're really interested in this topic and idea of preparedness, we will be putting some of those resources up after the talk. Moving on, let's grab another one of these questions that are coming from here on kind of the similar theme on preparedness and how to get ourselves the best prepared. So there's some conversation on how we can follow these weather changes, how we can really stay in tune to what's happening around us. What do you find the best resources for that? There's the National Weather Service. There's some questions on what's better. Is it the Weather Channel? Is it AccuWeather? What are some of the best apps out there? But for general situational awareness and focusing on the U.S., but also just kind of around the globe, what do you find is a really good service?
In the United States, I generally I have a lot of friends that work for the National Weather Service. So I generally find the National Weather Service to be the most accurate, the most upfront. You can go through their forecast discussions on their website, and you can find a little bit more technical information on what they're unsure of. I also use the Wonderground app and the Dark Sky app, and those are good. Dark Sky, I think, was bought by Apple. But those are really good in terms of getting the information to you quickly and accurate information. As when it comes to the Weather Channel versus AccuWeather, I have beef with them both. That's a little bit more personal for me. I really don't really care for either one. AccuWeather decides it's okay to issue their own tornado warnings and stuff like that. Not okay with that. That needs to be done by National Weather Service professionals who are used to doing that, that have authority to, for example, set off sirens and stuff like that, and provide a national standard for when it's okay and not okay to issue those. Because if you have one county that goes by AccuWeather tornado warnings and one county that goes by National Weather Service warnings, and AccuWeather issues a tornado warning but National Weather Service doesn't, you can get people freaking out in one county because they don't know why there's a tornado sirens going off or their phone is going off saying take cover, and another county the National Weather Service isn't selling them anything, and then they find distrust in the National Weather Service, or vice versa. So that's my beef with AccuWeather. In terms of their forecasts, they're not wrong. It's a good app for general forecasts. It's just more of a personal beef for me. At the same time, Weather Channel I also have a beef with. They name winter storms, which causes confusion. You see it on Facebook or Twitter all the time. Winter Storm Tyrone is coming, or Winter Storm Eugene is coming, or Winter Storm Sarah is coming. No, winter storms don't have names. That just creates more confusion for people that are just trying to get reliable weather information. Naming storms is a publicity stunt for them. That's my beef with Weather Channel, but the same general rule applies. They're not wrong. They have their own weather models that they base all of their forecasts off of, which they are entitled to do. I just have some personal issues with how they go about their everyday business.
And that, I can tell you that is definitely mirroring the conversations that I've had with friends in the meteorology or in the emergency management community that have kind of shared those similar concerns as well out there. I'd like to ask you, just from what I'm using, given to us by Team Rubicon, what do you think about the Barron Threat Net? I know that's more of a subscription service, and it's another private service, but what do you think about their capabilities?
Yeah, Barron ThreatNet is definitely good. I use a user satellite service when I am storm chasing. They are very reliable in terms of their real-time data. They're reliable in terms of their forecasts, and they do weather graphics for television stations. Barron is a good overall service. However, it ain't cheap. I will say that now. If you want to go more of a free route for weather stuff, as I said, Weather Underground, or Wonderground on the phone it's called, or Dark Sky is probably your best option. If you want to pay but you don't want to pay, hundreds of dollars a month, I would go with Radar Scope. It's a free one-time $10 for the app. You get high quality radar data and all that stuff, and then you can add on $10 a year for some extra features, which a normal user probably wouldn't need. It's $10 a month, I think, for the Pro Tier 1, and it's $100 a month for the Pro Tier 2, which is mostly meteorological data for meteorologists. In terms of forecasting, as I said, Wonderground is good. I personally go off the weather station. I have one of the us as an emergency management organization has a bunch of the new WeatherFlow Tempest weather stations, which integrates our data into the weather models that we get from our weather station and creates a customized forecast for us. And that's what I do.
Awesome. And we'll work on putting some of the links of what we're talking about as well in our weather channel too on the Discord server. Feel free to check those out. We'll put those in shortly after this live talk is concluded. So by the time you hear it as a recording, those will be available on our weather channel. There is a couple of conversations happening in the text channel that I think would be good to bring up as we're talking about this kind of warning systems and app services you were just mentioning there. Should know one of our established members in the community has asked that, as meteorology improves, we see localized forecasts, and I think if I remember right, I believe this concept is sometimes called like micro local forecasts. But for particularly for
Microscale, yep.
yeah, particularly for the emergency warning aspects of it, and I think this is a really interesting point. I'd be curious to see where you think this is going. It seems to me that this we're really cutting edge on this, and I think this really seems like it's going to be something over the next decade or so. But they note in here as the constant struggle that we have in emergency management is, somebody gets a couple tornado warnings a year, they don't materialize, they ignore them, they're covering a wide area. So as we get more and more micro local on forecasts and warnings, do you see that happening? I guess, do you see that meteorology, as this research is going on there, we're getting better and better data, better and better technology employed, that we're going to be able to forecast right down to neighborhood codes versus like a wide swath area, and half the people don't see the warning materialize and then ignore it and create communication resistance tendencies down the road?
Absolutely. In terms of this is a big topic in research meteorology right now. There are a lot of people working on localizing tornado warnings, and it's exactly because of this. We use what we call the FAR, the false alarm rate, and it's roughly around 80%, I believe, the last time I checked. 80% of tornado warnings do not materialize in the areas in which they are issued. And that's concerning because, as you said, it leads to standing outside watching the storm. It leads to just ignoring it and continuing on with life. It leads to those issues. It's very serious in terms of what they're trying to do technologically. They're trying to advance it down to the neighborhood code areas. They're trying to see how this would work. In terms of I mean, I get a tornado warning and I go storm chase a storm there. So I understand, trying to ignore it because it's like, oh, great, another tornado warning it's not gonna happen. There's not gonna be anything. This is where OSINT crosses into real-time storm, and this is what I've been working on myself with emergency management. We had a tornado outbreak in the area in 2017. I was sitting in the EOC by myself. It was mid-afternoon. It was on a weekend. There are no other emergency management personnel around, and a tornado outbreak occurs. And so I was on the county social media, and I was tweeting out the images that my storm spotters were sending to me. That not only got media attention, but it also got people's attention in terms of looking at, hey, this sucker's actually on the ground. It's actually doing damage. You need to get under shelter. The tornado that started in my county that day ended up being, I think the track was 118 miles long that day, because we were able to get the word out and say, hey, this is the real thing. This isn't some false alarm. That is something that I think as an emergency management profession that we can make some progress on. The National Weather Service can help that with us as well. But it is a serious issue, and it's something that needs to be addressed, and that's something that's being worked on. How soon this could roll out, how accurate will be, that time will tell. What I can say right now is that there are a lot of people working on these very extremely localized warnings. We have made a lot of progress. The original Vortex project brought tornado warning lead time up from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Vortex 2 brought it 10 to 15. We're sitting right around 15, 17 minutes now, I think, lead time on average for tornadoes now. And it's only going to get better, and it's going to get more accurate. It will be interesting to see exactly what will happen later on. Tornado warnings used to be by the whole counties. Now they're distinguished by portions of a county. Tornado warnings used to be entire offices. I remember tornado outbreak of 76, the super outbreak. The National Weather Service in northern Indiana issued a tornado warning for the entire county warning area. That's issuing a tornado warning for 30 counties at once because of a tornado outbreak. That no longer happens. because of the technological advances that we've made, and we are continuing to make those, and we will see results sooner or later. Whether the public will change their perception of those warnings, whether the public will accept those warnings, that's what we'll have to see. And the National Weather Service is working on that too, especially with their new enhanced tornado warning language, which they started with last year, I believe.
Now, I just find that so fascinating. I can see the direct impact. I mean, you want to talk about advances that have real change and that real world impact. That right there is huge. It's emergency management, as you know, communication resistance. When you talk about hazard communications and, okay, we're going to risk communicate, and there is risk communication hesitancy built into that because people hear these messages all the time, and how do we, filter through that chaos and that noise? That micro local ability to really reach in and project directly to the community that is most likely to be impacted. That's just a massive game changer in the EM world. So that's really interesting to hear. I have to say, the Barent Threat Net, we use that at Team Rubicon, especially when you're in the field and you're leading teams and we're, following up on a storm and cutting pathways for first responders. That it's interesting to see how much they have improved and getting better and better on projecting warnings right out there to team leads and strike commanders. Hey, it looks like it is going to be dangerous in the direct area you're at, and be able to keep multiple teams in the field and only pull the teams that we need to due to weather risk. And so it's interesting to watch that sort of evolve the past few years.
And it's only going to get better. Let's be honest. You can't be worse than what it was in the 70s. So we've made a lot of progress, and it's getting better. Slowly but surely, we will get things done. A big thing right now, I will say, that is preventing us is federal funding.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but the federal government does not want to put money into weather stuff. They want military stuff. They want to put the money into, whatever else. Space exploration, don't get me wrong, I love space exploration, but they want to put it into certain things like that. They don't want to put it into things that directly impact every person in the country, regardless of who you are or how rich you are or, how well off or how poor you are. Radar coverage right now is, for this day and age, for the technology we have, it's actually embarrassing in the United States. While we have 100 and some radars in the country, 122, 140 something, I don't know, I can't remember the exact number. We need a lot more in order to continue the advanced research and to continue to advance stuff. And that is what partially is what is holding us back right now.
Do you see, as the climate change conversation kind of ongoing, it's a politically hot topic, but it seems to be picking up more steam and more relevance. Do you see that as that conversation expands, that it's going to directly impact this type of hyperlocal forecasting?
The answer is, when it comes to the federal government, you never know. I'm sure you're well aware of that, but it should, because these storms are going to get worse and worse. There's going to be more and more of these issues, including public disregarding things, and we need to take it seriously. And the only way that we're going to be able to mitigate some of the damage is to prevent it. You can't prevent damage after it's already happened. You can prevent damage. You can prevent life saving if you take the time, you take the money, you take the power of preventing it from happening in the first place, or perhaps preventing the suspicion in terms of hurricane and tornado forecasting of people that it's not going to happen. It has to come into play. Unfortunately, a lot of the effort goes into mitigation. We need to look more seriously at the prevention aspect for disasters.
Yeah, absolutely. I can completely support that statement. I think that's they always talk about how FEMA is basically the guys that come in and do recovery, and put a bunch of money to rebuild homes, but the idea of how to actually prevent is critical. So I think this is a good time to start kind of wrapping up, and I think there's a great question here to begin segueing into kind of a conclusion here. Maddie T49, who is one of veterans and current military members, and I believe actually is in weather, if I remember right, asked a question on what sort of tips or ideas would you give somebody, or suggestions to career pathways for somebody who's a recent graduate in meteorology that kind of wants to get their foot in the door in this topic of what you're talking about, wants to try to build a resume? What sort of things could they do to make themselves more attractive to companies? What are some pitfalls out there that you've seen from meteorology graduates? And how do you just break into the field in general?
A big thing for a recent college graduate is to build your brand and work your connections. If you're looking to get into a company, go to seminars, go to conferences, talk to the meteorologists that are there. Even if you're not interested, seem interested in what they're saying, because they may be able to lead you to a job in the field. They may be able to say, hey, I know this person that's looking for someone. You may not be interested in working for my company, but would you be interested in this? Because I know they're looking for people. The second thing is you need to build a brand, make a website. If you're looking to get into broadcast meteorology, make reels on your green screen at home. Put in the time, put in the effort and preparation. It's not only going to help you for getting a job, it's going to help you retain your skills. Practice making forecasts every day. Maybe not for your region. Try something that may challenge for you. I know one challenge for me was always trying to forecast in the shadow of mountains, because those are horribly mauled by the models. And so you have to do everything pen and paper. You have to see where the cold air advection is going to come from, where you're going to get moisture from for snowfall in the mountains, and to the points east in the shadow in the northern hemisphere. What's going to be the aftermath? What's going to be left for that area? Challenge yourself is what I can say. The Weather Challenge, WX Challenge, is a great resource for challenging yourself. You're forecasting for a different location. I think it's every week or every 2 weeks they change it. And that helps you push your comfort zone. You're forecasting exact precipitation amounts, exact temperature amounts. Just try to hone your skills in as best as you can. And who knows? Who knows what may happen after that? In terms of the emergency management side, if your local emergency management agency, or maybe a local emergency management agency near you, has volunteer positions, join them. Become the agency weather guy. You will get unlimited references. I know when I was looking for my first job, after college, I got a large number of references from my emergency management agency because of the work I had put in, the weather forecasts I make for them, and their accuracy. It is all about working your resources to your advantage. Some of that you require a lot of time. I have thousands of hours in emergency management for the county. I think I'm well past the 10,000 hour mark as a volunteer. So, or I was. So, just do your best. Before I became supervisor anyways, I was at well past 10,000 mark. But do your best, put a lot of effort into it, and jump in feet first, and you never know what kind of doors are going to open for you.
I do have to say it's there's a lot of non-governmental organizations that are involved in emergency management and disaster response, disaster preparedness. And if that is a field that interests you, whether it's meteorology related or not, it helps provide so much context and information and awareness from a multitude of fields, whether it's logistics or planning or operations or understanding, HR, whatever sort of field you're interested in, doing that work in the context of disaster prevention, response, and recovery really helps sharpen skills. And there is a ton of volunteer opportunities out there, from my own organization that I always love to plug, Team Rubicon, to American Red Cross, tons of religious-based organizations. I mean, there's a lot out there. So finding those opportunities and exploring them really helps, kind of like Adam is saying, I think build that skill set, some really austere environments, which really translates well. So what I'd like to do is just do kind of one final round, look for any additional questions out there. If you have any kind of last questions you've been mulling over but you want to get out, post them now in Al Talks, and there's a couple people with hands raised, so we're going to grab them and bring them in real fast and start wrapping up our talk. So Avilian, who just joined our server, so welcome, has another question. I'm going to bring them up. Feel free to ask another question, and then after that we have the professor who wishes to ask a question, and we will take any other questions that the audience has as we start to conclude our Al Talk. So Avilian, you are up first. Feel free to jump up and ask your question.
So there was these things that I heard basically just today and yesterday, and it was how people in California should start preparing for the wildfire season with respirators and such. What do you think of that?
Good question.
Yeah, wildfire season is a big thing. Fire weather is a big thing as well. Wildfires are going to continue to get worse as climate change continues, and I apologize, I didn't hear the full question. But wildfire season is getting close. It is coming to summer. Santa Ana winds are going to start blowing here soon. Well, I mean, maybe not right away, but fire weather is coming. And so a big part of preparedness for fire weather is, again, making a plan, have things ready to go if you have to, because you never know when or where that wildfire is going to start. It could be caused by lightning, it could be man-made. You never really know. And so the biggest plan for fire weather is to have a kit and have a plan to be ready to go.
And I will speak on the respirator issue just as a former medic and coming from that background. You know, the deal that you get into with any sort of fire is you get ash fall. You know, if you can get into a bad wildfire, you may get into smoke inhalation. So a lot of times what's recommended is just wearing some sort of basic respiratory protection, whether that be like an N95, some sort of surgical medical mask that we all have now from COVID, to even like a half-face respirator, like some people will stockpile. Those type of things, anything that just helps to keep from breathing in stuff that's kicked up, dust from storms, any of that kind of stuff that gets airborne, particulates that get airborne, that's what they're referring to. And it just helps protect your lungs from those microparticulates that may get in there and perform lung damage.
Yeah, it's key to have some sort of N95 or something like that if you're in a fire weather area as well, because even if the fire is not near you, that smoke will have to go somewhere, and that may end up in your area. So it is always a good idea to have a respirator with you.
Any further questions or comments on that, Avilian?
No, that should be all.
Okay, thank you. So what we're going to do is we have another person coming up, Professor. I'm going to try to say the second word of that. Yes. Perfect. You're going to go ahead and come on up. Just remember, speak slowly, clearly, because it is being recorded for Spotify. And feel free to ask the question or make your comment.
Thanks very much. First of all, I want to say I regret that I am joining this rather late, so I'm sorry if you've already answered this question, but I had a question specifically about building resiliency in vulnerable populations when it comes to disasters and things like that. Have you seen in your experience, or what have you seen in your experience that have been effective resiliency building strategies, specifically focused on vulnerable populations? And do you think that more could be done, or how much more do you think could be done to help address kind of some of the shortfalls like that we see in resiliency resiliency building when it comes to those populations.
Absolutely.
Fantastic question.
Yes, and this is a key point that I definitely want to hammer home in terms of mitigation of disasters, is especially the lower income and the poor living quality areas have a huge issue in terms of recovery, and preparedness. To be honest with you. There are some initiatives down south. Obviously, you don't have too many trailer parks out in the plains, but we're seeing the Southern Alley. A lot of people call it Dixie Alley. Apparently, I'm not a very politically person, but apparently it's too PC to say Dixie Alley. That they have started putting. They have a lot of trailer parks down there because of the income equality issues and that kind of stuff. And so one thing is that they have started putting in tornado shelters and mobile home parks. And that has had a huge difference. It has made a huge difference in terms of death totals, because instead of staying in mobile homes, people are going into the tornado shelters that have been pre-built. That is definitely something that we can improve in. In terms of hurricanes, again, we had Hurricane Katrina just slam right into one of the poorest areas of New Orleans. New Orleans was all but decimated by Katrina in terms of those areas. And so we need to put more effort into having the resources in place, in terms of having those resources ready to go at a moment's notice in terms of mitigating those disasters. Again, though, I want to point out a lot of the response strategies go into mitigation especially on the federal level. We need to focus on the prevention of these issues. So enhancing radar coverage of vulnerable areas, enhancing the data sets that we have from research meteorology in terms of getting more localized information. We need to have more resources such as tornado shelters or areas that vulnerable people can go for major disaster situations. While they convert football stadiums into somewhat shelters, football stadiums are not great storm shelters for hurricanes, tornado outbreaks, any of that. There needs to be something more substantial in terms of prevention, and that's I think the point that I want to point out. These all can be solved with prevention. Of course, there's going to be damage. Of course, there's going to be a need for mitigation after it happens. But if we can prevent these issues from happening in the first place, maybe we won't have as much. In terms of vulnerable people, food is a key factor. Toiletries, personal items, stuff like that. Those are all in great need as well.
You know, a great example of what you're talking about too. I mean, we look at the most recent massive disaster we've had with COVID-19, and how there's been a complete disproportionate effect we've had in communities that are not as traditionally infrastructured or resourced as other communities, such as we see in Alaska Native and American Indian communities, especially like Navajo Nation, which had a huge, massive impact from the COVID-19, or one of the greater impacts compared to a lot of other communities, and just how little infrastructure and investment in resources there has been, and how crucial it is to make them more resilient. Team Rubicon, we've deployed a lot of times to communities inside Navajo Nation and other American Native communities that are just really struggled with having that emergency management resiliency built in, and the need there for a lot more infrastructure and connections, funding, all of those kind of things, because that's what really helps build that resilient network. Absolutely. Any other
I was going to
thoughts
say,
on that, Adam?
did that get your question, or are you looking for more specific?
No, I thought that was excellent. I thought that was a great answer from both of you guys. Very illuminating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. So what we'll do is, I think we have gone through quite a few of the questions. We've been talking for a little over an hour and a half now on this topic.
Hold on just a second. Sorry.
Go
I don't mean to interrupt the host. There is a couple questions I do want to ask in the Al Talks chat answer real quick. Is there a trade-off between amount of warning time and warning range? The answer is yes. That is what goes into the pod percentage of detection for tornadoes. There sometimes can be a trade-off. We are working on minimizing both issues. So that is something that we are taking into account in research meteorology, and we are trying to figure out how to minimize both of them at the same time. And that is one of the biggest challenges that they are facing now. There's another question about the Great Green Wall Plan for Africa. Does it seem feasible? It's been going on for 10 years. Roughly 15% of it is done. Hopefully more progress will be made because it is a good idea. I will always be for trying to plant trees, trying to grow more fertile land, especially in some of the hardest hit areas of the world. And so I think it will help, if not the entire world, especially just that area. And finally, any good resources for conducting area studies to prepare for your local potential issues? Absolutely, there are some excellent resources for doing that. You can contact your local emergency management agency. They're going to be more than happy to help you in terms of preparing for what may affect you locally. As I said earlier, ready.gov is a big, big deal in terms of getting prepared for any eventuality, as well as anything that may hit you locally. And if there's anything locally, like, for example, a nuclear power plant or a chemical plant of some sort, your local emergency management agency will be able to help you and give you some guidance on that.
All right, man, that was a last-minute blitz there. We get everything in. If you have any additional questions, or maybe you think of something after the talk is done, one of the advantages of the Project Owl Discord community is that we are always here, and we have channels devoted to these topics. So feel free to drop any additional questions you have, maybe you'll think of later. You can put those questions up both in our Owl Talks channel, or we have an entire channel on the server that is devoted just to weather, natural events, kind of emergency response. All of those things are found in our natural events channel. And so you can also drop questions there, resources, or if you think of a cool study that you wanted to share, that is a great area where we share and disseminate information at. And for everybody listening, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to spend with us. This has just been another Owl Talks that we've done, part of our service here at the Project Owl OSINT community. We really appreciate you stopping by. We hope that if you haven't checked out our OSINT Discord server, that you do so and come say hi to all of us here, where we're having conversations like these all day, every day, along with following geopolitical climate, plane tracking, boat tracking, everything that is covered in the open source intelligence community we do here at Project Owl. Adam, any final thoughts, any comments or closing statements you want to make before we wrap up here today?
I don't really have too much. I want to thank everyone for listening in, asking questions. I enjoyed all of them, and if you ever think of any more questions for me, feel free to tag me. I'm not always around. My DMs are open, of course, as well. But anything OSINT related, weather related, emergency management related, even 911 dispatch related, I'll be able to help you with that. So feel free to DM me or tag me on the server, and I'll be able to help you out. Thanks again for tuning in. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/ProjectOwlOSINT.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been one of our OWL Talks. If you are interested in other topics, we have OWL Talks on North Korea, the life and the nuclear projects. There, we have an OWL Talk on violence studies and risk assessments and threat assessment and management as well. And we have future OWL Talks in the works on a variety of topics, lectures, discussions, and question and answers of all sorts related to the open and source intelligence community. So keep an eye out for those. You can find them where you find all of your podcasts on Spotify, YouTube, Anchor, and everywhere else. We really appreciate the time. Thank you for checking us out at Project OWL. Have a great day.